The vast Texas desert stretched endlessly, wild and unforgiving, especially on a night like this. A violent sandstorm howled across the barren landscape, whipping up thick clouds of dust that swallowed the horizon. Caleb Morgan, a man long accustomed to solitude, sat behind the wheel of his aging pickup truck. It was late, and he shouldn't have been out in this weather, but a section of his ranch fence had blown over, forcing him to check on it. The wind slammed against his truck like an angry beast, rattling the metal frame. As he navigated the narrow dirt road back toward his ranch, his headlights swept across a figure moving through the storm. Caleb narrowed his eyes. A trick of the light, maybe? Dust storms had a way of playing with a man's vision. But no, the figure was real. It staggered forward, barely upright, battling the relentless wind. A woman. She was wearing a tattered wedding dress, the delicate fabric shredded by the storm. Her bare feet stumbled over the scorching sand, and her dark hair, half undone, whipped wildly around her face. Even through the thick veil of dust, Caleb could see something was wrong. The unsteady steps, the blood staining the sand where she walked, and a quiet desperation in the way she moved. He knew better than to get involved. Trouble like this had a way of following a man home. But walking away, that wasn't something he could do either. His grip tightened on the steering wheel. Then he hit the brakes. Caleb cut the engine, letting the howling wind take over the silence inside the truck. He watched the woman through the windshield, tracking the way she staggered forward, as if every step was a battle against her own body. She didn't see him. Or maybe she no longer had the strength to notice anything at all. Instinct kicked in. Before he could think twice, Caleb pushed open the door and stepped out. The wind hit him like a wall of needles, grains of sand biting into his skin, but all his attention was fixed on the woman standing just a few feet away, barely upright. "Are you all right?" He had to raise his voice over the storm. Slowly, she turned to look at him. Her eyes, storm gray and clouded with exhaustion, blinked at him in confusion. Her lips parted, but for a moment, no sound came out. Then, in a voice so soft he almost didn't hear it, she whispered, "Please, don't let them find me." And before Caleb could react, her knees gave out. He lunged forward, catching her before she collapsed onto the unforgiving sand. She was lighter than she should have been, as if exhaustion had drained the strength from her bones. As his arms wrapped around her, he felt the bruises beneath her torn dress, the rough patches of skin that told stories of struggle. A slow, simmering anger burned in his chest. Who had let her get this way? There wasn't time for questions. The storm was only growing fiercer, and if they stayed out here any longer, she wouldn't last the night. Caleb lifted her into his arms, carrying her swiftly to the truck. As he opened the door and carefully settled her into the passenger seat, the cabin light glinted off something on her wrist. A diamond bracelet, its stones catching the dim glow. It was a piece of jewelry that didn't belong here in a world of dust and danger. Caleb clenched his jaw. He'd seen pieces like this before, things that belonged to the wealthy, to the kind of people who never set foot beyond their gilded palaces. He shut the door, started the engine, and turned the truck toward home. Whoever she was, whatever she was running from tonight, she was safe. Elena woke to unfamiliar surroundings. Soft morning light streamed through the curtains, casting a golden glow over the rustic wooden ceiling. The room was eerily quiet, save for the gentle rustling of wind through an open window and the distant sounds of horses in the stable. Her body felt heavy, every limb aching with exhaustion. When she tried to sit up, a wave of dizziness crashed over her, forcing her to grip the armrest to steady herself. Where was she? Her mind was empty. She struggled to recall a name, a place, a reason why she was here. But everything remained just out of reach, hidden behind a thick fog. The door creaked open. Elena flinched, turning toward the man who stepped inside. He was tall, with sharp blue eyes and a quiet presence that carried an air of solitude. He placed a steaming mug on the small table beside her. "Drink, you need your strength." Elena hesitated, staring at him, then at the cup. She wanted to refuse, but her throat was painfully dry. She reached for it, taking a small sip. The warmth spread through her, but it did nothing to calm the storm of confusion inside her. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse. "My ranch, about 30 miles from the nearest town." Elena frowned. I don't remember what happened." Caleb folded his arms, watching her with an unreadable expression. "You really don't remember?" His voice was slow, measured. "Not your name? Not why you were out in the desert in the middle of a storm?" Elena started to shake her head, but then her gaze dropped to her wrist, where a diamond bracelet gleamed in the morning light. She traced her fingers over the delicate surface, feeling the engraving on the inside. Small, elegant letters spelled out a name. "Elena." She murmured it softly, as if the word itself might unlock something inside her. "Elena," she repeated, her voice distant. Then she looked up at Caleb, her lips pressing together before she finally spoke. "I think that's my name." But even as she said it, uncertainty still lingered. The days passed, and Elena remained at Caleb's ranch. She wasn't sure where else to go, or maybe she was just looking for a reason to stay. During the day, she watched Caleb work, tending to the horses, fixing wind-damaged fences. Occasionally, he let her help with small tasks, fetching water, feeding the horses, folding blankets on the porch. But Caleb kept his distance. He didn't ask questions, didn't push her to remember. Even so, Elena knew he was watching, waiting to see if she would slip and reveal something. She didn't blame him. If the roles were reversed, she would do the same. One morning, as she was clearing dishes from the table, Caleb spoke up. "You don't belong to this kind of life, do you?" Elena froze. "What do you mean?" Caleb set down the mug he had just washed, his gaze flicking to her hands, smooth, untouched by hard labor. "The way you hold a knife, the way you walk, even the way you drink your tea," he shrugged. "It all tells me you come from a different world." Elena swallowed hard, turning away. She couldn't deny it, but admitting it meant facing a truth she wasn't ready to confront. Everything changed that afternoon. Elena stood near the stables, watching Caleb work. He was trying to calm a restless horse, a wild one he had rescued from an auction. She watched the way he waited patiently, never forcing the animal to trust him, just standing there, steady and calm, letting it understand it was safe. Elena smiled without realizing it. "What?" Caleb asked when he caught her staring. "Nothing," she shook her head. "It's just, you're good with them." Caleb shrugged. "Horses aren't like people. They don't lie, they don't pretend." Elena felt something tighten in her chest. He didn't mean anything by it, but the words struck something deep inside her, a part of her that had spent too long pretending, too long living a life that wasn't her own. That evening, they sat on the porch, silently watching the stars. "Have you ever thought about leaving this place?" Elena asked. Caleb was quiet for a moment before shaking his head. "I tried once, but in the end, I always came back." Elena looked at him. She understood that feeling better than anyone. She had been running, but deep down she knew what she really wanted was a place to return to. With each passing day, Elena felt more at home at the ranch, and with Caleb. She began learning to ride a horse, though her first attempt nearly sent her tumbling to the ground when the horse bucked slightly. Caleb stood nearby, arms crossed, an amused glint in his eyes. "Don't be so stiff," he instructed. "Horses can sense fear." Elena bit her lip, took a deep breath, and tried again. This time she did a little better. They spent more time together. Caleb taught her how to properly build a fire, and she taught him how to make a real cup of coffee. They talked about the little things, but sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence. One evening, as they sat on the porch gazing up at the stars, Elena suddenly asked, "Have you ever been in love?" Caleb tapped his fingers lightly against his mug, staring into the distance. "I have, but she chose a different life," he shrugged. "I wasn't the right man for her." Elena didn't reply. Something in her tightened at his words, though she wasn't sure why. When Caleb finally turned to her, his gaze was softer than she had ever seen it, and in that moment Elena realized her heart was slowly tilting toward the man sitting beside her. The Texas sun dipped lower, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and gold. Caleb and Elena stood side by side in the stable, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. Elena had just finished brushing a chestnut mare. Sunset, Caleb had named her, for the way her coat gleamed like the evening sky. "You're good at this," Caleb remarked, leaning against the fence. "Sunset doesn't trust easily." Eleanor turned to him, her eyes glinting with quiet triumph. Maybe she just needed a little patience. Caleb started to smile, but then it faltered, his breath catching in his throat. He hadn't realized how close they were. So close he could see the flecks of silver in her storm-gray eyes, feel the warmth of her breath in the cool air. Elena's lips parted slightly, as if she too could feel the pull between them. Her fingers curled against the wooden railing as if holding herself back. Caleb's pulse pounded. For a moment he leaned in, just a fraction, drawn by something inevitable. The moment stretched, fragile and charged. Then, as if the spell had broken, Caleb tore his gaze away, stepping back sharply. Elena blinked, as if snapping out of a trance, but her heart still pounded in her chest. That morning started like any other. Elena woke early, stepping onto the porch to breathe in the crisp Texas air. But when she walked into the living room, she froze. Caleb stood in front of the TV, his expression unreadable. The morning news was broadcasting something that made Elena go rigid. Elena Brooks, fiancée of businessman Adrian Vance, vanished just before their lavish wedding in Las Vegas. Her family is pleading for any information regarding her whereabouts. Elena felt the room shrink around her. The air thickened, the words on the screen hammering into her like a warning bell. She couldn't pretend anymore. Caleb switched off the TV and turned to face her. His eyes weren't angry, weren't accusing, just waiting. Elena clenched her hands together, willing herself to stay calm. "I was going to tell you," her voice was barely above a whisper. "I just didn't know how." Caleb remained silent. Elena took a deep breath and told him everything. She was the daughter of a once powerful businessman who had lost everything. Her marriage to Adrian wasn't about love. It was a transaction, a way to salvage her family's name, to keep her father from drowning in debt. But Adrian wasn't someone she could ever love. Faced with the reality of a life she didn't want, she ran away the night before the wedding, not knowing where she would go, only that she couldn't go back. Caleb listened, never interrupting. When she finally fell silent, he simply said, "You don't have to run anymore." But Elena knew it wouldn't be that simple. That afternoon, Elena stood on the porch, gazing toward the stables where Caleb was working. She knew she couldn't stay here forever. She had run long enough. It was time to go back and face reality, her family, Adrian, the life she had abandoned. She stepped off the porch, slowly making her way toward Caleb. When he saw her approaching, he stopped what he was doing, as if he had known this moment was coming. "I knew you'd leave." His voice was steady, without surprise. Elena nodded. "I need to set things right." Caleb was quiet for a long moment before asking, "Are you sure this is what you want?" She looked into his eyes, deep, unwavering, filled with things unsaid. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I can't keep running." Caleb gave a slow nod, but there was something in his eyes, something he wasn't saying. He pulled off his hat, ran a hand through his hair, then looked at her again. "If this is what you need to do, then go," he said, his voice steady but not emotionless. "But don't think for a second that I want you to." Elena's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to say that. Her fingers curled at her sides. Leaving was supposed to be the right choice, but then why did it feel like she was breaking apart? For a fleeting second, she wanted to stay, wanted to say something, anything. But instead, she simply stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, holding on like she never wanted to let go. Caleb didn't flinch. He held her just as tightly as if memorizing the way she fit against him. When Elena pulled away, she looked at him one last time before turning toward the truck Caleb had prepared for her. As the door shut behind her, she glanced into the rearview mirror, seeing Caleb standing there, motionless, bathed in the golden Texas sunset. And for the first time since she ran away, leaving hurt. A week had passed since Elena left. Caleb went on with his life, tending the horses, fixing fences, spending quiet evenings on the porch, but things weren't the same anymore. Because she wasn't here. He wasn't waiting, wasn't hoping, but every time the wind carried the scent of rain, he still found himself looking toward the dusty road leading to the ranch, wondering if she would ever come back. And then, one afternoon, a car appeared on that road. Caleb stood up, his heart beat a little too fast as the door opened. Elena stepped out, her hair catching in the soft Texas breeze. She looked at him, something steadier in her gaze than before. Without waiting for him to speak, she walked toward him. "I thought leaving would bring me peace," her voice trembled. "But it didn't. I spent the last week trying to convince myself I don't belong here, but the truth is..." She stopped right in front of him, her eyes brimming with emotion. "I love you, Caleb." Caleb didn't say a word, just looked at her for a long moment. Then, he pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. She had come back, and this time, she was staying for good.